Okay, good evening. Apologies for those waiting for the late start due to technical difficulties. This is the Capital Planning Committee, Monday, November 20th, 2023, meeting at the Ritter Building Lower Conference Room. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this will be able to be broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel at later date, and will be uploaded to the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours after the meeting's conclusion. If you would like to join this meeting with a computer, tablet, or smartphone, the webinar ID on Zoom is 846-0798-7173. If you'd like to join by phone, the number is 888-475-4499. Once again, the webinar ID is 846-0798-7173. The posted agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the beginning, discussed at the meeting, and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. So this is everybody getting a roll call vote. All members are present. I'll open it up by asking if there's any public comment from the committee members. Hearing none. Any public comment from the public? Ms. Lizio.
Rhonda Lizio, 181 Reservoir Road. I'm here to provide the history and background for the drainage swales at 181 Reservoir Road. In the DPW Director's capital plan presentation at the last meeting, I missed the agenda and therefore the meeting which I had planned to attend when I saw that the item was on the capital plan. The first thing I have to say is the project does not meet the capital plan criteria. However, it is my position that the town was in error in 2016 when it added an asphalt berm, which begins 550 feet uphill from my driveway and on the opposite side of the street. I think it was in 2005, the first time I reached out to the town regarding stormwater entering my driveway. I was told I would be put on a waiting list back in 2005. And just the problem has just continued and continued since then. But I was shocked when the town came in, repaved the road, raised the road, and put that asphalt berm coming down both sides of the street. This is not like the Flat Hill Road and Page Street area. My area is all gravel, the entire street. And it starts, the berm starts at the top of the hill. I walk that street every day for years with my dog. There was the claim was that the berm was needed to prevent the street from eroding in the right of way. There was no erosion occurring until like halfway down the hill, 250 feet from where they put the berm. When you have a low-lying property that's got a high water table on it, I understand that water will travel to the lowest point, but what the town did was maximize the flow rate down to property and immediate increase to the water table on my property. It's unacceptable. And I tried to work with them. I own 200 feet up the hill from my driveway. I have frontage all along that street. And I said, could you remove the top section of the berm where there was no erosion? And then in the lower section, can you make a cut into it so I can try to access, make an area that can absorb water so that I'm not facing these out of control flow rates that are completely dependent on which is the intensity of the rainfall event. And I was told, no, I'm not allowed to. And there are so many restrictions that we found out through going through conservation on our property. We are very limited on what we can do. And we are not ones to burden others with our problems. We now live in a world that doesn't allow individuals to solve their own problem. So that's how you get a $75,000 capital project. Thanks.
Any other public comment? I will comment to that. I was looking for my phone because your neighbor and our fire chief Sullivan put in a word to be read into the record, and then I realized that my phone for some reason is not connecting. I don't really check it during the week because I have my computer, so I didn't know that it wasn't connecting to the town, but I will paraphrase him, who sent an email in total support of what you just said, saying that as a neighbor of yours, he absolutely concurs that there was no problem in this until houses were built uphill and therefore put more water onto the street in an attempt to funnel the water. They put the berm in, which basically fed the water directly to Miss Lizio's house. So he wanted to share his support for you publicly. I am sharing that here. I am apologetic that I don't have the exact wording. I will get it to the rest of the board, or the rest of the committee, I'm sorry. But I did want it for the record that he did send in a letter of support exactly for what you're saying.
So I do have a comment. And that is that I'm still really troubled with this issue, and quite frankly, other issues that are somewhat similar. And there are similarities between this issue and the Flat Hill Road issue, in that there's a strong argument to be made that building and lack of oversight in terms of what's going to happen with stormwater as a result of building leads to a problem that the town is then asked to own, or theoretically does own, because the town owns the road and the water's flowing down the road, and therefore it's our water when it's flowing down the road. I don't understand what path we could potentially get on to address these issues while simultaneous from happening in the future. And I just don't know how our government can or should function to be able to do that. And I do recognize that, you know, I think we do have a responsibility here to take care of the residents in these areas. It just scares the hell out of me that we're throwing more and more and more money at dealing with stormwater issues that, in my mind, can and should have been prevented. So I don't know, I think we're in a tough spot, and you know, it's not the only capital problem that we're going to be presented with this evening. There's another one that, you know, really comes down to probably human error and poor engineering, but nevertheless we have to deal with it. So but in this case, there's a systematic thing. Like, people are building new homes, they're asking for new subdivisions, they're building on lots that, you know, a few years ago we might not have thought was a buildable lot, but the bylaws change, and now all of a sudden we're dealing with unanticipated drainage issues. So I'm just, I don't have a solution. I'm just communicating my overall exasperation with the issue.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Absolutely.
If Mr. Bidmore, if you don't mind, I'd love to give a little bit of planning board kind of feedback from the chair of the planning board. I don't want to risk doing the whole I speak for the whole board, right? Sure. And actually, just for scope in my answer, Ms. Delizio, if I may, because this will help me frame, when were the houses up the road from you built? Like roughly, I don't need an exact date.
It was shortly after the berm was added.
Can you give me a year? I just-
16,
Great.
18. It took
Perfect.
A couple years, they started with the houses furthest away from me.
What, great, oh, thank you, that just. I have some history on our stormwater regulations, and that helps me give scope to an answer. And, so. Part of the answer doesn't help residents like Lizzie.
Just listen to
you.
Lizzie, I apologize.
That's okay.
But one of the things we have done in the past few years is, the planning board did put together a much more stringent stormwater policy or stormwater bylaw that the town approved. It goes beyond the expectations of the state even. To, in theory, help address some of this. Now, we talked about it. Now, this was I think a year or two ago.
I recall.
Yeah, so that doesn't help problems that already exist fundamentally, and zoning isn't retroactive, so we can't go, hey, you gotta fix it. That said, new construction, should be much better. However, we also face the issue with century storms are no longer a once a century thing. They're just not. They're frequent, and that's another problem. And our bylaw is aggressive, but it's really hard to make a bylaw that's as aggressive as the water problems being faced in the state, in the country, in the world now because of these changes. I would also say I did bring, based on discussions of this committee to the last planning board meeting, I did then bring back the notion of where are we with the idea, is a stormwater task force looking at a stormwater utility, what's going on there? And Mr. Wilsner, I believe, is our representative to the stormwater task force. There had not been a recent meeting. There was one following the planning board. I'll have more info for us where that process is next time, I believe. But the planning board also as well would very much be interested in working with other boards and committees in the town. Depending what the stormwater task force has already put together to look at this more holistically, because the planning board agrees this is an issue. And as we expressed here at a prior meeting, these capital expenses keep coming up, and there really has to be a better way of addressing it. So the planning board is very willing to work with others on this. It has to be a more broad thing than just us writing it, because it deals with more than just land use. It's public roadways. It's literally everything.
Well, it's also, this is a fiscal issue, right?
Yes.
And we're being asked for funding for capital planning, but my understanding is that the state law does provide for non-permeable surface fees and those kinds of things that can go into funds that can help address and mitigate these issues.
And that's where.
And we, I've been to plenty of town meetings. I understand, how people are going to be are going to adversely react to being asked to pay another fee or another tax, which effectively this is. On the other hand, there's a long list of things that we're not going to do because either in addressing this problem, which is a problem, it's a very acute problem, whose front lawns turn into lakefront, at certain times of the year, but it really is a problem for everybody as well, as roads are deteriorating or whatnot. And I don't think that this is something that, can be indefinitely funded using our 2.5% increase every year. It's not sustainable.
Okay, I would venture to say that, yeah, we're not gonna solve that today, and it's also. Aside from the ancillary or tangential issue in front of the capital plan, this is a much larger issue than the capital plan. So let's get on to the people who are waiting to talk to us. The school department is presenting to us tonight. So I don't know, Dr. Burnham, who from your group is presenting, or if all of you are, or if you are, so please join us here. And I will. No, we'll just leave that, no, I cannot be bothered. Take it away.
Thank you very much.
You
So,
tell me next slide, so I'll be I'll be the kid running the projector, like we're back in fourth grade again.
oh my gosh, those were the days. So with me this evening, I have Mr. Michael Cassidy, who is our businessman. We have been without a facility director since June 30th. So what you see before you this evening is largely a result of our analysis. Mr. Heavey is also here with us this evening. He is our new Director of Facilities and Grounds.
Welcome.
We'll get started with the first slide, which gives you an overview on a single page of all of the different projects in the 10-year capital plan.
And apologies to people at home, these kind of things do not translate well.
They
I'm
do
sure
not.
you've heard me say that a million times. But,
We thought that it might make sense to take the 10-year plan building by building. So if we start with Lunenburg Middle High School. The project that you see there has to do with the turf field. The turf field is essentially approaching end of life. We're in at least year 7, I believe, might actually be a little bit more than that. A typical lifespan of a turf field is 10 to 12 years. The 12 years you get if you have some excellent maintenance of the turf field. While we do our very best to maintain the turf field, we have had consistent challenge with damage from heavy rain. So drainage on that entire complex has been a challenge. We'll get to see some photos here as well. In addition to damage to the turf field, there's some damage to the track around the turf field, the retaining wall that separates the turf and track from the bleachers, the walkway in front of the bleachers, the concrete block wall behind the bleachers, and under it's all leaning. I'm not an engineer, but I suspect that drainage issues, water flow in that area has contributed to the shift of that wall. So it's a significant project in its entirety, but we're gonna take a look at multiple phases.
Has the track been replaced yet?
The track has not been
Just the
replaced.
surface of the track, right?
the turf itself.
Okay, and there's an enterprise fund set up for the turf, is that correct?
For replacement of the
Yeah.
turf?
Yeah,
No.
No.
We pay a note. There's a debt associated with the turf.
That we're still paying.
That comes out of the local budget, our school department budget.
Which paid for my fees for the reviews.
In a roundabout way.
Oh,
Yeah.
also, some of it's paid by the lighting, right? Doesn't Verizon pay something for using some of the lighting towers there as
I don't recall the,
If that's so, we don't get, the school department doesn't get those revenues.
I think all of that goes to,
And facility rental does not cover the cost in
no, nothing.
its entirety.
Yeah.
All right, so if we take a look at the next slide, phase one, is being funded through ARPA funds. We have $50,000, to start an initial assessment. In phase two, which is in the FY 25 plan, there's a request for 200,000 additional dollars. Again, this will help to secure a more detailed engineering survey with some recommendations.
Is that $50,000 on contract or up for bid, or
It will end up out for bid.
when are you anticipating that?
It's in a draft form. I think, it would likely need to go to the school committee for some input. And then post it at that point.
So what's the delineation between phase one and this phase two?
Really, we started looking at, just the totality of the project. Phase two is getting into more detailed schematics and drawings. I just want to remind the committee, I know everyone has been at that field, right? That was a community-based project. There was no architect. There's no plan specifications that exist for that area. It's a great community project, but there's no drawings. We need some backup to move forward.
Where I think the majority of that money is gonna be spent is isolating problem. So for example, I believe at one point, we sent some cameras down, some drainage pipes and that kind of thing. The results were inconclusive. But they didn't go far enough, what we're able to do is an extensive, I don't know what the right words are, but there's a certain amount of study that you do when water flows through drainage systems. I don't know the right terminology, obviously. That needs to be done to be able to isolate the problem. There was drainage put in when it was built. There's a ton of water that goes down that gully that runs to the south side of the field and then east. But somewhere it's not flowing right, and it's probably several locations. If you think through all of the issues that we have in a torrential rainstorm, and unfortunately I've been there for a number of them, the field itself begins to float like a carpet that has water underneath it, and it's quite scary when you see kids there. But at the same time, when you look at the problems that seem to be occurring with the granite wall behind the bleachers and the brick walls in front of the bleachers, it looks as if what's happening is that water is building up over time and then is slowly releasing and taking sediment out with it. So there's a drainage problem in there as well. So it's likely that there's multiple areas. And so this money is, first and foremost, before we start getting to drawings and figuring out what the feasibility of solving the problem is, we need to understand exactly where the problems exist, and isolate them. And so far they haven't been isolated. So the idea here is isolate the problem, figure out the feasibility, engineering, costs associated with dealing with it, and then ultimately go out and do the work. The challenge here, in a perfect world, you would do them and see. The challenge is that the clock is ticking with that turf, and we may be in a situation in a couple of years where we're doing it in sequence and we're not able to use the turf because we've gotten to the point where it needs to be replaced, but it wouldn't make sense to replace it until you've got the underlying engineering issues addressed. So we're caught in a bit of a catch-22 from a timing perspective, at least from my perspective.
Has there been discussion on what we still have in turf. A lot of places are removing turfs because of health.
Yeah, so that's a hot topic amongst the NFL and professional sports leagues. Messi came in and, you know, signed a contract and said that he would not play on turf.
Right.
I've done quite a bit of reading on the topic, and to my knowledge, it's inconclusive. There just is not a clear indication that these, you know, claims that there's a higher degree of injury associated with turf fields versus grass, the modern turf fields that we're using today. In my opinion, it's not conclusive. The problem that you run into is that the cost of maintaining a grass field with the amount of programming that we do on our fields, if you ran the number, is extremely expensive. We're spending over $40,000 a year just in maintenance of the 3 fields in the front, and we're shutting them down in the summer months
And it's
Because-
still not long enough.
because they're so beat up, and it's still not long enough. If you go out there today, those fields are beat to hell. And so it's just over programming 4 fields right now. And so at least having one that you can count on that is not gonna have a gigantic dividend at any given time that, you know, which is, you know, frequently the case with the field that's directly in front of the bleachers or the grass fields. You know, my very non-expert opinion here is it's in our best interest to have a mix.
Okay.
So beyond phase 2, we imagine there may be a possibility to break out the actual rehab and construction into 2 phases, although we'll have a better sense of that after phase 2, when we have some recommendations. And then,
Just back to the user fees. Do the user fees go into a special account that's saved for this purpose, or are they just?
goes
dispersed
into the facilities review account, and it is not earmarked just for the turf field, because we do have to maintain the other fields that are heavily played upon.
And do you know how much you take in a year on user fees?
About $36,000 a year.
Primarily Bengals and
Excuse me,
primarily the Bengals and soccer.
soccer, any other, that might be, one of the fields.
So the next series of slides give you a look at the complex. So you have an aerial view. There you see the track where the drainage is supposed to go. You can see there that the fence leans. That's because the wall is mounted to is also leaning. You can see that the press box sits atop that concrete block wall.
There's actually granite blocks right below the press box as well. It's not all concrete.
So right now you're underneath where the press box sits up above, and you can see the to one side, there are bleachers on the other side, which would be to the back of the photographer in this particular shot.
In the left-hand picture, the press box is right above us.
Right above it.
Where are these blocks on the right?
That's the walkway that would take you to the bleachers. So there's a shot of the entrance into the press box up from the access road that goes around behind the middle high school. And there you see the shot of the press box from down below, where it sits up above the bleachers and in between 2 sets of bleachers. And there's that block walkway right in front of the bleachers.
One point on the slide, the previous slide is that press box is not handicap accessible.
Agree with that, Rand? If the ramp was redone?
Is it a throwaway?
What?
You have to take a look at that curve.
Well, obviously, there's, I'm not saying it is, I'm saying that to make it looks pretty easily doable with a new door and whatever, but yeah, but I think the ADA is probably the least. bit of
It's
the
the
problem.
least of our problems here,
Right.
yeah, but. Having recently done some studying on that in relation to a further topic that we'll talk about later tonight. You've got all these turning radius. Issues with ADA that I don't think that press box would be able to. Address in its current form.
Sure.
So in this slide, you can see damage to one of those concrete blocks that makes the wall. And you can see that the fence that sits atop the concrete block wall is also leaning. And then there's another shot of the pavers that are on the walkway that takes you to the bleacher. All right, Turkey Hill Elementary School. So we're requesting funds to do a study for the renovations at Turkey Hill. We're looking to do a full assessment and attic designs. Initially, when we first started talking about this project, we were thinking that we were going to limit it in scope to an assessment just of what would it take to become ADA compliant in that building. But honestly, with the conversations that everyone's been having about where does a full renovation or new build of Turkey Hill come into in context of the larger conversation that's been ongoing for the last several years about rehab and new build for municipal building space. Doing a more extensive assessment with designs will give us more information, something more realistic in terms of what will it cost us to really renovate Turkey Hill, and what does that look like. So that's when the school committee reconsidered and voted to amend this particular project to bump it up to a full assessment and schematic design and to increase the overall total cost of this assessment. In the long run, we think that this will actually be money well spent because it should give us much more information as we consider town-wide, as we consider next steps as it relates to that particular building.
Can I just offer a little more context on this from the position of the school committee? So, last year, the school committee engaged in a series of requests to our facilities director at the time saying, give us a full view on what it will take to get another 10 years out of Turkey Hill. And the thinking was, if you look at the work that's going on with the municipal building committee and the debt capacity in town, we need another 10 years out of that building to keep it going. To get to a point where we may have sufficient debt capacity to do a major renovation or replacement of that building. That was basically the mindset at the time. And so our facilities director at the time went out and got estimates basically for every major system in the building. Did a basic back of the envelope assessment of the systems and got estimates from vendors around what does it cost to replace the HVAC or the roof or whatever. And all of that stuff is reflected currently in, I believe, FY 30 or 31. It's basically the result of those estimates that came from vendors. There's a missing component, which led to the original $100,000 that we had put on this document, which was for any given one of those systems, it's likely to trigger an ADA requirement. Because if you spend more than a third of the total assessed value of a building, of a public building, you have to bring it into ADA compliance. And what we don't know is what it will take to bring that building into ADA compliance for the exact issues that I just mentioned on a much smaller scale in the press box, which is, for example, it's concrete, it's block, it's brick and block and that kind of thing. They're like, I don't know what they are. They're giant, they're old school building blocks. They're
Cinder blocks.
cinder blocks. That's what I'm looking for. In the interior of that building on the first and second floor around the bathrooms in particular. So if you need to bring water into those bathrooms, you're probably in for a challenge, at least in terms of keeping that into ADA compliance. And what we don't know is, for example, is there sufficient floor space to have a bathroom and for it to be compliant? And how much reconstruction needs to be done and that sort of thing. Add to that, the gymnasium, you've got steps going down to the gym, you've got locker rooms on either side. Don't necessarily need that for an elementary school. So maybe it's in scope, maybe there's a lot of assessment work that needs to happen to figure out if we trigger ADA, what we'll actually need to do to make it compliant. Then we got into a discussion with the building committee and had a joint meeting with the municipal building committee. As I think you're all aware, they're looking at a 3-phase plan that includes this building, an annex to this building, addressing town hall, and then ultimately dealing with TC Passios as first transition space for phase 1 and phase 2, but then ultimately as potentially a community center. And a dialogue has opened, a narrative has opened around, does TC Passios make best sense to be a community center long-term, or would it make better sense perhaps to replace Turkey Hill, a newer building, put a community center in that building that already has a commercial kitchen, has a more modern gymnasium, has rooms that could potentially be used as town offices and for other community type things. And so we were asked, if we were to turn over that building in 10 years to the town, would it be ready to go? What would it really take to make sure that that building is a viable building even beyond the 10-year window that we were looking at it? Because we've all been criticized about what the school committee did back in 2011 when it turned over TC Passios to the town, right? A building that was falling apart, that needed a lot of work, that still hasn't been addressed. So how can we address this in a more responsible, long-term planning kind of way? Well, the reality is that we don't have that information. We just don't know what it's going to cost and what design work will be required to bring that, to make that building a viable building for any length of time, let alone the horizon that we came at it from a year ago. So coming out of that meeting with the municipal building committee, we thought that it would make better sense to do a more comprehensive analysis and schematic of that building. So at least we would know if we wanted to invest in that building today and ensure that it was an elementary school for 10 years and well beyond that, what would be the system required to address? When would they need to be addressed? And what would the long-term cost be? By the way, not only just in terms of the construction itself, but also we would need to consider the disruption to our operations during that period of time as well. So there's a lot there, but it's the kind of information that we'll really need to have to be able to work with the town to sort out what phase 3 really is and where we can best invest our money over the next 10 years to ensure that we're on a path to meet our needs and the larger needs of the town.
And you'll see on this slide, I notated that this is a school committee priority ranking of 3. The school committee had discussion around all of the projects that were listed for FY25. When through a bit of stuff to try to reach consensus around a ranking of these projects. So you can see that this ranked pretty high because essentially, as Mr. Beardmore said, this is going to give us information that helps us plan for much of the out years of the capital plan, and it gives information to the town for a larger conversation about the future of Turkey Hill Elementary. So the next.
So if we're thinking 10 years out
Yep.
and you're looking at growth projections in the town and classroom size availability, are we able to put all the students in the schools that we have, the 3 schools we have, 10 years out?
We have some flexibility of space, at Turkey Hill right now. I will say that any projections that have been done in the past around student enrollment have never held water, ever. Not even the ones that were done for the middle high school for the MSBA project. So numbers are a bit unreliable. But I would say that based on the space we have right now in that building, we could add additional classrooms. We may need to empty some spaces that are currently used for storage of reading books and other curriculum related materials. Whether that's a pod rental to move some material storage outside so that we can have classroom space inside. But I do think that there's a little bit of wiggle room here at the Turkey Hill.
When was Turkey Hill built?
69.
Yeah.
It
Was open in 69.
So these slides just give you some pictures of the facility. So on the left-hand side, that's the camera and card reader for access to the front entrance. We'll actually be upgrading that as part of a capital project that was approved for the current fiscal year. That next photo you can see is the cafeteria. There's a stage inside the cafeteria. There you have some of the challenge. You see one of the bathrooms on the left-hand side. You talk about a wheelchair and turn radius. These facilities are far too narrow for that. We have had students who are in a wheelchair. You can get them through the door, even though it is not ADA compliant. What you can't do is allow a student to go in there and out. It becomes a lot trickier to navigate that space. What you see on the right-hand side is one of the main corridors up into the academic wing from the main entrance. As you're looking at that photo there, the cafeteria is immediately to your right. If you were down low in that photo off the photo, one of the challenges here, I believe, is the slope. The slope is not gradual enough, I believe. So that ramp, we believe, is not ADA compliant.
That picture doesn't do it justice, but that is, it's but the school has had challenges with students in wheelchair on each side.
So on this slide, you can see pictures of the elevator, and I use that term loosely. It's actually located underneath a set of stairs. So it's in a stairwell. Mr. Beardmore had the opportunity to ride that lovely mechanical wise.
Is it much different than this one?
It's smaller. And it's, so it's a very narrow entrance. It could not be used independently. And then, which that one I believe can, that is actually an ADA compliant elevator
Because you can see there's a
Can't get
handle
it
on
out
this
of that
door.
independently.
You have to pull the door open to be able to get
And
in.
then it actually opens into a classroom.
Yep, so that's on the next slide.
So you're, when you go up, you're in a program classroom that, yeah, it's just very odd. It's not quite sure what the thought process was on that one.
What they had available.
Yeah, but I mean, truth be told, I was in high school when Mike Membrino was injured and we managed to build one of those deals in the old high school. That was like, it went literally right up the stairway.
Right.
And he was able to maneuver that on his own, and for some reason, we couldn't make that work in Turkey Hill. So it just must have been limited options or something, I don't know.
So this photo here shows you one of the bathroom facilities, straight ahead there, is the sink. You can imagine, having to roll up to that in a wheelchair. It presents, a challenge. And you can see in the, photo on the right-hand side, that it's a common, occurrence, at Turkey Hill. You can see that there's a slightly raised threshold, moving from, the main hallway there into the bathroom that you can see pictured on.
Those issues just not be fixed. I mean, you could put it in the sink, right?
We could, again, the challenges, around,
I'm not
This-
discrediting the long-term aspect of it, but it's an immediate issue.
that would resolve one,
Yeah, I was gonna say that would make it more compliant, not compliant, because
right?
Yeah,
closer to compliant.
Right,
the answer is yes.
But there's some things you just go do because it's the right thing to do.
mhm. All right, so, next up is, a complete window replacement. At Turkey Hill, this portion here in FY 26 would be for plans only. We would need an architect to come in, an engineer to come in and, determine how, to approach the replacement of all of the existing windows. Particularly, what's referred to here as the storefront glass, which is basically floor to ceiling, in several places in the building. Right now, all of the windows and glass are single pane. So, when it's cold outside, there's not a lot preventing the cold from coming in. And when it's very hot outside, the same is true. It's very difficult to, mitigate that heat, from coming into the building. Having some energy efficient glass and windows would be a great help in that building.
And what it costs to keep the building, your annual.
Well, we have-
We're working on gathering some numbers related to that.
The next slide gives you, a look at what we're talking about relative to that storefront glass. So it's an entire wall of glass. And that would be on the-
60s architecture, wonderful school architecture.
Yep.
That's the school I went to school in, so.
So that would be
Just-
on,
Yeah.
the building,
Are these the same glass surfaces that you're asking to put film on?
yes.
So after you put the film on, you'll be throwing it away to put new glass in?
I don't know how long it's gonna take us to throw them away. The film, when we talk about the film, we can talk to that, there is some value to the film that will help mitigate some of that solar heat from coming into the building. A really tough time when it's hot outside. We had a 3-day warm spell. I call it a warm spell back in September because we didn't technically, I don't think, get above or at 90 degrees more than one of the 3 days. But there are days that we do actually have a mini heat wave where it's 3 or 4 consecutive days of 90 plus. Maybe once that heat gets into that building on the second floor, if it's 90 outside, it could be 92 inside. So any help that we could get, reducing the heat that gets into and builds up in the building over multiple days would be a benefit.
We'll get to it,
Yeah.
but there's clearly
Just
two
remember-
very separate issues here.
Yeah.
There's-
Right,
There's the energy issues
And security.
and there's the security.
Yeah, I
Yep.
was bringing it up from last year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about it.
How is the 290,000 for architecture arrived at?
you want to speak to that?
We're looking at total project cost, it's a percentage of the total project cost. So, the project is a little complicated. Where there's some, asbestos.
In the glazing,
Excuse me,
in the glazing.
in the glazing, that has to be removed. So it's really evaluating. And looking at each window and taking a look at how that's going to be removed. So there's that piece and then the actual installation and speccing out the new windows.
Right, and we need to be sure that there aren't structural factors to take into consideration. And we take the photograph that's on the screen now. I mean, it's an entire wall of glass, so we'll need to assess how to approach that. There's also in the plan for FY 26, 40,000 toward upgrading classroom technology at Turkey Hill.
Can I just interrupt you? I just wanted to verify. So there's a possibility. There's some discussion about applying for MSBA money. So that's the Massachusetts School Businesses.
Authority,
What?
Building authority.
authority.
Authority. So, so there's big projects, the school replacements and the talking about possibly initiating a small project.
They call it
campaign again.
accelerated repair.
Yeah. But they will not fund any project if the district or the town does not have plan specifications on the shelf to move forward. So their money is not gonna pay for plan specifications. This money would set us up to possibly get state funding.
Additionally, you know, that is one project, the replacement of the windows, and there are a few others in here as well. That will be engaging with the Green Communities Committee to see what, if anything, in our capital plan. Our immediate for FY 25 or the out years may be eligible for funding through Green Communities. I don't really know exactly which ones may be eligible, nor do I know the context for requests that might come from other departments in town, and what their cap is for monies that can be requested. I mean, even if we could potentially partially work on replacement of windows through Green Communities, we would look to do that as well. So there are several things at play here, I think.
So we have the 275,000, which was the ADA that became more comprehensive, and then the 290 windows. Why not just do them together?
They're different. The 275 is an assessment and schematic design. The window is a full engineering plan, everything you need to go buy and install the windows. So it's different stages of they're two different things.
I mean, theoretically, we could do the other larger scale assessment and not have as much detail as Mr. Beardmore is talking about. For this, the specs to go ahead and do the window replacement. Coming back to what we talked about, where we would have energy savings there, if we have more efficient windows. The town may decide that we don't have the funding to put into renovations of the building as a whole, but a smaller standalone project we might be able to do. So to have the specs to do that project as a standalone would be helpful for us.
And can I just add one more thing? If the town does receive MSBA money, we have to for educational purposes.
It has to stay open as a school.
For 10 years.
Mm.
So that buys us, that secures the window. And that buys us some time to get to that point. For looking at FY 31 or beyond, and what are we gonna do with Turkey Hill?
Right.
So
But the small project plan doesn't lock you out from larger projects, right? That was the difference, whereas the larger project plan, you can't do anything else in that building for 10 years also, right? Is that my understanding? Like, if you do a small project, you're not limited to doing another small project
No,
or
you're
another
not.
big project in any kind of time horizon.
Correct, but the way things work with MSBA is you never know.
Yeah.
You never know
They
what
shut
your
off funding.
chances are, because every single year, whether it be for an accelerated grant or program or project, or for a full renovation, or for a new build, your chances, are our chances good? Do we have to, submit 3 years in advance in the hopes that we kind of climb up the priority list? It really depends on who else submits the same year you do and how you fare compared to the other projects that have been submitted. Now, there are some years that we would rise right to the top. Depends on who else submits that year and in what condition their buildings are currently. And I can imagine that there are other districts out there with buildings that are actually in worse shape than our Turkey Hill. So those years we may not.
So just timing wise, 26 is the window and 25 was the more comprehensive plan. Perhaps the and the 26 window was architecture and schematic design. So we should probably update the slide to say that.
Okay.
But I wonder if the architectural aspect of it should be pulled into that other project so that, again, we have facts on the table come next year as to what the
So
best
the
courses
The
of action.
advice that you were given on the assessment and schematic design is that the architectural costs would probably be an order of magnitude above that 275. It's a percent, the way that guess it kind of works is it's sort of a percentage of what you would anticipate the total cost of. And we can actually swag it based on square footage and what MSBA has funded for other projects over the course of the last few years. And we would be several $100,000 above that for a full architectural plan. Normally what you would do, if you're doing something like that, is you work that into your request so that percentage of that would also be reimbursed. It would be part of the building cost, which is precisely what we did with the middle high school, by the way. We had a schematic design and then we went to the town, got clearance for the capital exclusion and to go forward with the MSBA plan, got both approved. And then the architectural work was worked into the total building cost, and we're effectively paying for half of that as MSBA is picking up the other half. So the stage that we're at right now is not something that you would work into an MSBA program, but you still need to do that upfront investment.
Right, because we're gonna need it to even submit a request.
But again, why wouldn't you do that pure architectural analysis in the
For the windows,
windows?
because the window is not open here. Actually, we can't submit that right now. The program that was just referred to is not an open program right
at the
now.
moment.
The MSBA, over the last couple of years, basically turned off the spigot because
For the
The-
smaller projects.
the cost of the larger projects ballooned because of everything we know about what's happened with construction costs over the last few years. The small project program got shut off. So if it's back on, it becomes available to us, we can. If this is funded, we can do both simultaneously, but right now that is not available to
Yeah,
us.
they recognized that there were districts that had begun their construction project. And cost like $7.9 million for air conditioning on a building. Went through the roof. And there were a lot of communities were not in any position to pick up that additional cost. What do? You stop the project and just leave it? So they recognized that there were a lot of communities that were in a bad spot, so they stopped putting monies toward the smaller accelerated repair projects and put all the monies into helping and reimbursing for those communities that were already in play.
What they've outlined for the small project plan, funding schemes are different. So a large project, you can work in your engineering and design costs, your architectural work. Your smaller projects, what they're saying is they're effectively shovel ready. The design work has to be done to take on the smaller projects. Currently, that's not to say that that's what's happened in the past or what will be in the future, but that's what they're saying for the time being.
I'm still kind of confused by why not.
There's a lot to it.
I'm still, I mean, I would hate to have two architects coming in and redesigning Turkey Hill, one for windows and one for the rest of it.
I understand the concern.
And why not get that assessment for the windows as part of that first?
You could,
phase?
but you would still not have done what's being asked for here.
I understand.
It would be,
Part of
it would be as much as 10 years out. So it's just, you're dealing with different timelines.
I think we can move on past the classroom technology.
So did we touch on the classroom technology or is it self-explanatory? Since you haven't said any word about it at all.
I think it's.
Okay, self-explanatory. There, I'll
I
answer
have
the
a
question.
question in the classroom
Okay,
technology.
it's not self-explanatory.
Well, I'm also on the Turkey Hill School Advisory Committee, whatever the term is. And so I was fortunate enough a month-ish ago to get a tour of the facilities at Turkey Hill. And credit where credit's due. Y'all are doing an awful lot with what's there. I love classroom tech. I was early in on really embracing it hard. Are there enough power outlets to have more technology at Turkey Hill?
No.
Cause I look at this and go, smart boards, well, smart, yeah, all of that's great. I saw 2 outlets per classroom,
Correct.
so
Presents a real challenge to delivering a modern day education.
I would find myself with that assessment. I guess my only question would be, can they make use? I want to see them having more classroom technology. I think it's imperative for quality of learning and for getting kids ready for the future. Can they make use of $40,000 worth of classroom tech with the current electrical infrastructure? And I'm not saying, that's not meant to be a leading.
Yep.
I don't know the answer.
So I think what we're probably gonna be talking about is network capacity.
Okay.
We've been waiting on Comcast, I believe, to be able to do some upgrade in that building. And it, you know, the communications piece, that could end up being phone system, because the phone system in that building, I think, is practically original to the building.
So we have smart boards in the building now. They're just-
So they're boards similar to that, and they are mounted right to a whiteboard
Yeah.
at the front of the classroom. Obviously, if you know about classroom technology, having a much larger interactive space to use footprint would be hugely beneficial. Clearly, the 40,000 is not going to give us that.
Yeah.
But we also may need to be upgrading what you see here, miscellaneous equipment. That could be Chromebooks, Chromebook carts,
Which we buy every year.
right?
So why wouldn't the 40,000 operating expenses I mean, technology is just an operating expense at this point.
Well, let me jump in. So part of it is potentially matching some E-rate funds. And so at one point, we were looking at expanding the network room, the switches. And improving the connection to the classroom, to the head end room.
Right.
And then adding some additional access points throughout the building.
And matching funds have to be a capital item, they can't be operating.
No, it can be anything.
I guess my point just being is, you've got a slug of 40,000 in 1 year. Just put $20,000 a year into technology. as an
We already do
operating-
more than that.
Well, then, up it by whatever for this 40, and let's not track technology updates through capital plans.
Well, it's a request that we can do this group.
Alright, and just, I know it's next year, but it doesn't really say much, it just says we're buying some stuff.
So I think one thought here is we could probably do sort of a comparing costs. We do spend year to year on technology, and we spend a ton of money on cloud subscriptions, curriculum related technology, Chromebooks, network equipment. We spend a ton, all that stuff to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. What we're not doing currently with those what we're doing with that is paying to operate it, and we're replacing stuff that breaks, or kids wear out their Chromebooks, they get to high school, they get new Chromebooks, right? By the way, Chromebooks need to have a battery charge to get them through the day, particularly in that school. So we buy Chromebooks for those purposes. These things would be a one-time cost that sits outside of how we would normally operate the IT budget on a year. Your point is well taken. Just increase that line by $40,000 in 1 year or $20,000 over 2 years. That would be well and good if we were not sunsetting our ESSER funds and looking at a 10% cost increase in health insurance this year. We're going to be making massive operating cuts to the school department budget this year and probably next year. So the ability to do a $40,000 payment to do an upgrade to Turkey Hill is very unlikely, given the track that we're on for basically a 2.5% increase from our normal town funded operating budget on an annual basis. It's just, I mean, the numbers just don't work.
Well, the pool money comes from the same place, you realize that, right?
I do realize
Okay,
that.
so then we're just playing, then this is just.
Well, no, we're not, because
Up to shelter.
we're absolutely not. And, you know, I sat here last year all through the entire process and asked the town manager to show us where the money was coming from and how we were getting to the money. And at the end of the day, what we got was a very formula-driven number that got us to how we were funding capital planning. And I'm 100% sure that that's exactly what we're gonna get this year. So if you're gonna tell me that it's not formula-driven and that there's an opportunity to up the number for capital planning or down the number for capital planning and up the number for the school department, I'm more than willing to have that conversation with you. But that is not the way we do business in Lunenburg right now, Tom.
I do think we should change the way we do business, though. I mean, we're not buying mainframes anymore for technology. Technology is just something you do.
I'm happy to have that discussion. It's just, that's not the way we're doing business right now.
And I will say that it is not uncommon. There are communities where replacement of devices is always a capital expense. It's not the operating budget. So it's not like it's an unusual type of request for capital. New roof at Turkey Hill. And the figure that you see there, we're estimating is approximately half the cost that of the new roof. That would be the town's portion after MSBA reimbursement.
Wait, so you're saying the total cost is $1,250,000 and this is half of it?
Yeah.
So we would have to.
Because there are solar panels on that roof, they're gonna have to be uninstalled. New roof goes on, panels will have to be reinstalled, so it's not as simple as just coming and rolling out a new rubber membrane on the roof. It's gonna be a little bit more work than that.
Do you have a life expectancy of a new roof?
I don't have a life expectancy of a new roof. You have any idea on the life expectancy of a new roof?
Of a membrane? Could be 15, 20 years.
And then what we heard for the,
I think the current one's a lot older than that. Yeah. I don't think it's been done
It has been done quite a
in this century.
I would agree with you.
I don't understand what Mr. Menard's question was. He says that this is not the cost of the new roof, is half the cost. of it.
That would be ultimately the town's portion after reimbursement is received. So essentially, for any of these projects that were eligible for MSBA reimbursement, we would have to put up the total cost and then be reimbursed by the state.
But
That value there is what would ultimately be the estimated cost to the town after the reimbursement.
so you're assuming we would get the funding,
Right.
Right.
and would we not do the project if we didn't get the funding?
That would be for the capital planning and the town.
The reason I ask is because it's a little bit, it's a little, no, it's not kludgy, it's not, first of all, it doesn't say that that's how it's, the cost listed is the town's estimate, so it doesn't give us the 50/50. So I please ask that you put that in.
It is there. There's a notation.
So-
Cost listed is the town's estimated cost after MSBA reimbursement, which it,
I just hope that
Generally
we don't
speaking, it's about
lose
50.
sight of that.
Yeah, so here's a question that, and I asked the question having no idea what the answer is. I don't know if we've done a capital plan project in the current schema of capital planning that involves an MSBA program. I think
Not that
most of
not
what
that
we've
I
done in the
recall.
past has been either exempted or regular borrowing.
Not
And
that
I
I
think
can recall.
in this case, if we were to go down that. I do think that capital is a reasonable avenue for this kind of project. It would probably have to involve a combination of regular borrowing and the capital plan to cover the reimbursement schedule for. So it's a little bit more complex than just the capital planning article as we think of it today.
I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that the value of the cost of putting on the new roof is.
Substantial.
1.2 million, where if the decision needs to be determined. If it looks as if, okay, and I don't wanna, characterize it for myself, but it looks as if that if we didn't get it, then we wouldn't do the project, that's why we're carrying 625, but if people aren't willing to say that, then it should carry the full cost. And it should say, instead of saying that the cost listed is the town's estimate, it should say that if we got MSBA, it would be reduced by this amount of money. Only because people are gonna look at it and look at the number.
You're
That's
fairly
gonna be the impact?
But- And if you want it that way, we can do it that way. There's several other things on that spreadsheet that are annotated this way. So,
Okay, well, then I will hesitate, I'll just say,
yeah, save it.
if it or something.
So we would have to actually budget the $1.2 million.
Excuse me?
We'd have to budget the one.
We have to find a way to fund it.
Right.
Yeah, I think so what I've kind of conjured in my head, and I don't know if this is the right path, it would have to be a more detailed conversation with the finance committee, the select board, town meeting, is I think a project like this would, number one, have to be funded as a capital plan item to show MSBA, we got the money, we qualify, it's good to go. And then probably regular borrowing to cover the other half that would then be reimbursed by the state. Which is why I asked, I don't know if we've ever done a straight capital plan project that involves MSBA, but it's going to require a level of
Coordinated.
financing that we have not previously done.
Right.
The HVAC system in the building. Again. This, replacement of the entire HVAC system, I don't know. Would be eligible for an accelerated repair project, replacement of a boiler. Yes,
Mhm.
the entire system. I don't think that kind of a project would. The entire project would be for that. However, if this were to happen in the context of a larger, more comprehensive renovation, there would be MSBA funding for that.
So two questions I have.
Mhm.
Again, I'm assuming a 50-50 split, so this is like 8.6, $8.7 million.
Yeah.
And number two is that because this is an FY 30 project, is this $8.7 million projected to be what it will be, or is this in
We actually,
current terms?
we projected the number based on, I believe, we went through this last year at the school committee meeting. When it landed in 2030, we added an accelerator based on the original estimate that we received last year.
Okay, so these are projected FY 30 funds.
Yeah, inflation adjusted.
So this is just addressing like HVAC requirements. If you get asbestos and
Correct,
everything else, that's a whole.
which is
nother-
why we'll have that conversation. We've lumped a lot of
Exactly
the,
why we need that assessment.
right, and that's why we've lumped a lot of these projects into 1 year, because we'll talk about that in a minute.
And way out in the future.
Right,
This is
time to make a decision before then.
the way I interpret. The upcoming projects that are gonna be presented to you is that the school committee is keeping it on the radar of this committee and of the public. Something's gotta be done by this.
And by the way, like, while the roof, I think, fits within the confines of how we do capital planning and what we can fund and what we can't fund, I don't think this does. So this is very likely, when it comes to pass, going to be part of a larger debt exclusion or something along those lines, just due to the sheer cost magnitude of it. I mean, we're not, even in 2030, we probably won't be funding a single project with $4.3 million out of the capital plan.
Be cool if we
It
were.
would be cool if we could, but it's probably not feasible.
Only the town's Powerball numbers hit.
So you have ductless mini splits as well for Turkey Hill in the plan?
Not in. Well, we've been talking about that in the context of alternate heating source. May buy us some time. With the building being operational in the event that the heating system fails. This past winter, we had challenge maintaining of room temperature in a classroom, in all classrooms. What we were finding was that, by the time, things got all the way around the last part of the run of the building, the temperature in those rooms was not holding, it was dropping. So it presents a challenge to bring in plug-in heaters because we only have that in a room, but that's what we have to do for those days. And we did the reverse of what we do when it's excessively warm. When it's excessively warm, we take the students who are on the second floor classrooms and we locate them somewhere else in the building in a cooler space, and or walk them up to the middle high school where they sit in either the cafeteria, auditorium, to get some reprieve from the heat of their classrooms. When we're having challenges with the heat during the very cold months, we try to relocate them to warmer spaces. But we did have some challenge, I think it was late last February, with a cold snap of 3 to 4 days, consecutive days were very cold. Our teachers got very creative and designed some activities for their classroom that involved blankets.
Well, that just put 2 and 2 together for me. There we go.
So split ACs were up in the matrix, but I don't see a 1 pager on them for Turkey Hill. So was it?
they weren't,
your plan or not?
They weren't included actually in ClearGov, and that's where I pulled all this from. Mini splits at Turkey Hill gives us 2 benefits. One, it helps us with the humidity in the building because we can get the humidity out. We can cool the temperature in the classrooms, and or we can heat and warm the temperature in the classrooms. It's a lot less expensive approach to addressing those problems in lieu of a major financial commitment to an upgrade of the entire HVAC system, which, you know, we'll have some better sense if we can get the study done, what that major renovation looks like, what it would cost. And if that is not a viable option, or that's an option of future, installing the mini splits gets us from here to there with some backup for heat. I will say this past winter though, we had maintenance staff in the building taking temperature in every single classroom at 5:30 a.m. so that I would know whether or not I needed to cancel school for the day because the rooms were too cold to get to reasonable temperature by the time the students arrived
In Turkey.
at Turkey Hill. And we do the same thing in reverse when it's very hot. I gather that data and we figure out whether I can open or if there's a chance I can get a partial day in and dismiss. It's become part of we do.
The split
It's not just watching the weathermen and trying to decide, like I will tomorrow night and early on Wednesday morning, what the situation is and whether or not we can safely transport kiddos to school.
But just, I'm still kind of confused. The split AC units that you have in the fiscal year 27 for $350,000.
There isn't a slide for that.
There
Still
isn't,
five,
no,
but that is in your plan. And how many, what percentage of the rooms would that cover?
I believe that we factored that in for all of
It's all
them.
classrooms, I believe, that was what we were. That was what we discussed previously.
Mhm. Yep,
Is any particular reason why there is no slide for something that?
yes, my error, I didn't put it in.
Okay.
Okay, so just number of classrooms at Turkey Hill versus primary?
In use, this year, there are 16 classrooms. There are additional classroom spaces that are utilized for other purpose at the moment. Depends on if and when this is all funded, but right now, I think we're talking about the classes that are largely utilized, and I believe that there's in the teacher's workspace, there is already an AC.
So the 350 wouldn't heat and or cool the entire building.
It's not gonna heat the hallway, it's not gonna heat the cafeteria, but the students aren't spending their day in the hallway or the cafeteria. I would suspect that if we were having major challenges with the HVAC system, and we only had supplemental heat through those ductless split systems, that students would be going down to retrieve their lunch in the cafeteria and returning to the classroom to eat it in a warmer environment.
We eliminate the whole $8.7 million of HVAC if we went complete mini splits.
I don't think if you have any hope of having this building be viable as a community center or longer term as a school, I think you're gonna have to do the entire system, because you'll want all of the building to be heated.
I think it's a question that could potentially be asked during that assessment process. Like I truly have no idea on that. I mean, even new construction buildings are being built with all kinds of wacky new
Yep.
heating and cooling systems, so I wouldn't rule anything out,
Problem
but
is every building that we've built in this town certainly since I can remember, since 2000, have always told us, no, this is the state of the art HVAC.
Yeah.
And then
It's
2
not.
years later, it's like, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, what's going on? And without a doubt, the library, the primary school, the public safety building, and I am not sure about the middle high school. I haven't really heard anything. What is the
It's been-
HVAC situation there?
it required some fine tuning in the early
But it's
years.
working?
But
That's
for
a
the most
1 out
part,
of
it's
4.
working. Although it did get struck by lightning. And the
Well, I
cooling-
mean, there's a plan for that.
But,
Catch a break.
but, yeah, we did get you a break, but but I think for the most part, that's been pretty well timed.
Okay, so 1 out of 4. So the
Yeah.
point is, every time we built a building, it's nice to see that it happened once. The engineers always said, coming from a tech background, I'm always amazed. It's like all the things we can do in the world with space exploration, we can't seem to get reasonable heat and cooling in a finite sized building. For any period.
That you can isolate the spaces.
Yeah, but they're not designed.
But the problem is,
They're not designed for commercial.
they're not
use.
designed for commercial use. They don't handle those super large areas that we need to handle
Right.
in that building, and they don't have a lifespan.
They don't have a lifespan, and they don't, and like as Mr. Jeffrey said, I mean, the through fittings into the building shell are not good. As long term, they are not good. So, let's get a fire suppression, because it gets so hot. Paper
It might spontaneously combust.
Did we do
Um,
floor tiles?
That's after fire suppression is fine.
Did I do it somehow?
So fire suppression, there is no fire suppression system in the building at all. Currently, it is not sprinklered. It was built before that was code.
But still, that's that's pretty amazing to me. I would think that they would require retrofitting to put kids in buildings.
They would if you doing major upgrades.
No, I understand that
Right.
part, but then they make you do a lot of stuff, but I mean, just the fact that you are taking,
Well, that's the challenge.
Kids
Once
everywhere.
we trip that threshold where we would have to be ADA compliant, we'll also have to be code compliant.
right?
So one project
Well, it's gonna be the
Opens
same
up the
argument we've had with every
cascade.
single other
It's
building.
the
It's like,
same.
it's gonna be worth fixing the building, and hopefully we don't wait until we get to, this is a 5.2 and let's say 8.7, so that puts us at 14 something, and so by the time we get to that, it's like, okay, what is the cost of a new building?
Well, that's exactly where we're at.
That's exactly where we go all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
The question I have is so much bigger than fire suppression system, and it's not. The face you see on me is, if you'll pardon my, language, how the hell is a town with such a high medium income at the place that we're looking at this kind of work for a 50-year-old school? It's a travesty is the politest word I have, and I mean zero disrespect to the current people in town government, to those running our schools, because you don't wake up one morning with a 50-year-old school that feels I'm kind of ashamed to say, for a town that, I mean, in theory values education, that we send our kids there. And it seems ridiculous with the income of the community, with everything else, that is where we are.
Okay, and I will respond, and I don't disagree with what you said. I will respond that we are in a much better place than we started when 2004 hit, when we built our very first building in town, and no building had been built in over 35 years. That was the nearest building that was built. We had a public safety building where the public safety employees were afraid of being in the building. Okay, so, I hear you, and we are coming, and I hope this is true, because it's certainly gonna outlive me. I hope we're at a point where when we catch up to these two, okay, when we finally catch up, that people heed what you're saying, so that we're not facing with this, because that's the problem all along. As soon as that building was built, as soon as everything's done, you gotta be planning for a leapfrog. Build this building, we need a new library, or when do we need a new, primary school? When do we need all these things? Well before. Now, we're getting a good lead time on Turkey. We didn't have a good lead time on the building next door that had sewage seeping up from the floor. We had no problem, I quote, no problem teaching the children. I mean, that's like crazy. We had no lead time to that. At least now we're talking about 5 years from now. And I agree with what you're saying. And to get a plan where people can get behind, because we should be deciding now, these are big numbers. We should be deciding now, are we really serious about these numbers? Or should we really be planning when the debt capacity allows that, hey, listen, we need another building.
And echo what both of you just said. I'm not quite sure what the question was, but the answer was one bite at a time.
Yeah.
We've gotta take this to have the answers to the questions that we're all asking each other, because invariably when we get to town meeting saying we want to renovate Turkey Hill or replace it or turn it into a community center and move someplace else, or whatever the recommendation ultimately is, that the homework was done to really understand the business case and the analytics that got us to that conclusion. Because if it wasn't done, when we skipped a step, the answer from Lunenburg town meeting will be no. And rightfully, I've lived in this town a long time. My mother was a school committee member in the 80s. It was a different generation running the town at the time, and the mindset was very different. It was, we'll spend what we need to spend when we need to spend it. And even then, we'll spend a little bit less than we actually need. And, we maintained our schools literally with duct tape and bubble gum. What you see in TC Passios today is an archive to that, right? It's literally, you can go back and you can actually point to some of those decisions that were made along the way in that building. It's unfortunate, and Tom and I have disagreed over the years about big decisions on certain buildings and that kind of thing, but conceptually, he's absolutely right? Like, whether or not we built that library in the right place or the right time, we needed to do something, right? And we did, with that building and public safety and primary and middle high school, and now we gotta figure this one out.
And I say my tirade, also knowing I'm the guy who came to one of our earlier meetings saying, congratulations, everybody. The word from our master planning consultants is that Lunenburg is way ahead of the curve compared to other towns in the state about maintaining its public buildings, including the schools.
Yeah.
And so.
Trouble.
Oh, I, in a grand sense, I very much worry about a reckoning on infrastructure, but that is in a much bigger scale than Lunenburg, but that's not anything this committee is about.
Well, I would say that to that point, I don't disagree with his statement. I think it's more of a statement about
Yeah.
infrastructure at large and if you don't live in one of the top municipalities who have, money, if you don't live in the Concord's and the Carlisles and, Andovers of the world, yeah, I mean, there's probably people out from here west that probably dealing with problems that we were dealing with 20 years ago, and they're in the same position. So, yes.
I do think it is for this board to, we are the capital planning, not the capital hearing committee. So I do think it is for us.
I think what I want to just piggyback on something that Peter said, and that is that when we get town meeting is not where you start building consensus. Like town building is where you close the deal, and when you go in and you pitch exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, with all the numbers and the research you did at that point, having had multiple meetings and presentations before then that invited the public, because that's what we continue to have. We have some people who sometimes the presentations are too late, sometimes people who just willingly have not been involved, so they come and ask beginning questions at the end of the process. And if you don't have the answers at a snap, you cause doubt, and once you have doubt, you'll lose, because when you get somebody to build a building, like this building was what, $72 million, the high school, spend that, they're okay with it, but you gotta have all the answers that they're looking for, so. Anyway,
It is shocking how many people watch these things.
Yeah.
All are boring.
I'm glad I'm glad they do, and thank you to those that are watching.
well, as I channel through what's on my satellite,
Yeah. Oh my God.
I would rather be listening to this, because it's basically no different, it's more educational. Oh, fire suppression, all right, so that's putting it in, it's not even a replacement, it's actually adding.
The next up is the floor tile replacement.
Now,
Again,
does this school have
This-
asbestos adhesive, like TC Passio?
A
so,
lot of it's been mitigated.
yeah,
Okay,
over a handful of years, Mr. Londa took it in phases. And much of that cost, I think, was through an earmark from the state
Yeah.
over a couple
I
of
remember him
years.
doing it, yeah.
But there are sections that remain. So what you're looking at there is the cafeteria and the corridor down the hall from the cafeteria.
Good.
Electrical system upgrade for Turkey Hill, so we can have more than 2 outlets.
Well, just look at this picture on the left.
6 years
Look at this
away.
picture down on the left. Look at the length of that hallway, and I see one
outlet.
duplex outlet. I mean, realize it's not a classroom, but even so, that is pretty astounding.
Wasn't a lot of need for electrical stuff in 1967, 8, 9, I guess.
No, they had
Well,
chalkboards.
it took a lot of squirrels to keep the dynamo going.
So I think that that's
There
pretty
we go.
self-explanatory.
Yes.
Plumbing upgrades, so we've already had some conversation around the need for changes in the restroom facilities, as you know. We do water testing annually and every single year. we're being flagged, from any of the faucets that test, at Turkey Hill for lead. Same is true at TCP. In recent years, we, have installed additional, filtered water bottle filling stations. So the students do not utilize, any faucets that might be in a classroom setting. Additionally, it's become the normal daily practice at Turkey Hill that teachers will flush the faucet, in the morning.
Have just, because this one is obviously the biggest of the school's requirements, so does this, I didn't study the first thing and I'm sharing my screen, so I don't want to go back, but what are the total project costs for the Turkey Hill?
It was
So, yeah,
14.
we've got the 10-year spreadsheet. At the end
Oh,
of this,
yeah.
event, we take that.
Okay.
And we already saw the elevator, earlier, so we've got that elevator replacement, at Turkey Hill as well.
Yeah.
And now the
That's what I
primary
saw,
school. So for FY 25, we're requesting 30,000 to secure a playground designer to come in and work with the community, the school community, the larger community, to give us some recommendations and a new design for the playground at the primary school. While all of that playground equipment is rated for use for the ages of the children in that building, if you go and stand next to it, it is a really large scale playground. It really is. I mean, the platform for the slide is taller than I am off the ground.
Remember the ones we had?
I just thought it was a function of, I suppose I haven't probably grown much since then anyway. Like now.
I think we might be approaching this from different angles when I ask this question, but you're saying that like it's a bad thing?
To be height challenged?
No, to
The size of the playground.
I admit, because the first thing we saw upon coming to the primary school with my oldest was, oh, that's awesome.
It is awesome.
And I
It
just
is
thought,
awesome.
own playground structure at home based on taller better. So
Well,
I might have opinions.
it's taller, I believe, than any of the playground equipment at Turkey Hill, actually.
Oh, it
older
absolutely
kids.
is.
The other thing that we are extremely mindful of, as we're looking at this particular project, is accessibility for all kids. It's that ADA, accessibility. We do have students, who have some physical, limitations. And if you take a look at the playground equipment here, there's not a lot that they can access with their peers. So we think it's time to revisit that and have somebody come in, work with the community, come up with a good design that would provide us a lot of, wow, that's cool, but making sure that it's age appropriate and safe, and that it's accessible for all of the kids in the community, not just the ones who attend the primary school, but our playgrounds are used by residents all the time, so.
Well, I'm glad.
Is it actually beyond be inclusive, right? That's like the standard that you should hit.
I'm glad for two things. First of all, that we're out of the stratospheric prices of things. And it's addressing things that I would expect to be at a school other than wow, we should have air and cooling and heating for a school. And maybe stop some fires if they start. I mean, it's nice, it's so refreshing. We're gonna talk about playgrounds, finally. So,
I do wanna say the fire suppression one is the one that's still, you know, I remember the Worcester fire.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
baffling. That,
Like,
it's
why is it
baffling
not
to
like-
me that kids are allowed in a school that doesn't have it. I don't care that it wasn't built with it, but that they didn't force you, like, you have to do something.
Well, I said my number one on the priority.
Yeah, so it's a good question. Very good question. I think in my mind's eye, as I looked at this, number one is from a timing perspective and a cost perspective. I feel like we gotta get our arms around the building as a whole before we go and put a new end system into that building. As I look at that building in particular, first and foremost, I'm looking at it from a security perspective. Which is why the window film is still very high in that building. The design of that building is such that it's got these, I guess we're now calling them storefront windows. That are just insane when you look at of all the, some other events that have occurred over the last couple of years. We need to be very mindful of how to potentially delay and disrupt an intruder. And in my mind, that is a much bigger threat than a fire in a concrete block building.
I was gonna say, I think part of it is what's the actual burn time on the building, because, I mean. If it's gonna take long enough for a fire to spread, you can get the kids out. If you can get the kids out faster than the fire is gonna spread. I mean, fire suppression's better, you can save more building, but you're gonna save lives either way.
I mean, it's, I don't know.
Didn't we rig that film very high last year?
No, we didn't.
No, we did not.
We didn't. And so.
I know,
And so one of the things that was discussed at length in school committee meetings when we brought this together was, first of all, the film was presented as a one project for all the buildings. And the reality of the situation is that when you're looking at it through a security lens, it's different from building to building, right? How you would think about a potential intruder in the middle high school versus how you would think about a potential intruder in Turkey Hill versus other schools. There's just a much greater amount of exposure in Turkey Hill relative to the other schools, which is why we ranked that particular school when we broke them out a lot higher. There was also, frankly, some discussion last year about the environmental aspects of that film. And I think, to be clear, potential benefits there. There was a long discussion this week when we started talking about the primary school about Turkey Hill and the heat, lack of air conditioning in that building. But in my mind, I've said this publicly, I am not looking at the window film. And my reason for prioritizing it high is not the environmental aspects of that window film. It is purely the security aspects. So our this year, given where it ranked last year, was number one, we didn't want to give up on it because the school committee still thinks that it's important and a high priority. But number two, let's break it out building by building. And our collective opinion is that Turkey Hill is the highest priority amongst the three.
And to be frank, there were I say members. I know of at least one member, it was me, who was who was flat out just not convinced that the security threat was significant enough for the cost outlay. And being realistic, I probably remain in uphill battle on that one. I'm not gonna say I can't be convinced because that's completely untrue. But I think I'm a harder sell on that than many due to how safe schools are kind of by default. And actual likelihood of harm. But we had that whole debate last year, and I bet we're gonna have a good chunk of it again this year. And I look forward, and if I am swayed, I look forward to that as well.
You weren't the only one on
on that position.
Dr. Burke, can I ask you a question? So you've got this playground over across the street that you're talking about potentially reconfiguring or whatever. And I get mixed up with the names of these schools. For the ages of the kids who mostly use that, what building are they in?
So we're talking about the playground that's located just outside of the Lunenburg Primary School, so a little ways down 2A.
The one across from Arbor Street, that's the one, not talking about Kids Kingdom, if that's what.
Oh, I'm thinking, yeah.
Kids Kingdom is one next to Eagle House, and that's not the one, that's not a school.
That's not even under the office.
That's not.
Oh, okay.
School.
It is.
That's not a school play.
Actually, we went through this last year.
Okay, well,
We thought it was, it is.
Well, we still maintain any broken.
Okay, fair enough.
As I get older, I regret more and more what I have to say in a larger volume every day.
So where is this?
Primary.
The primary school,
Down around the big shop.
across from Arbor Street,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you go down the
it's
driveway.
the one that's not part of the campus.
Oh, it's in front of the school. It's near the entry.
It's in the back by the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you can't really see it from the road. You have to go down the 1.5 mile long driveway to the primary.
But when you get to the school, it's right there.
Yeah,
Right, love it.
All right, thank you.
And the issue, by the way, I think it's a cool playground
I
myself.
do too.
But as it turns out, kids are getting hurt. And the equipment is built for bigger kids than what we have in that school. It's rated one way, but in reality,
In practical.
in practice, it's creating a problem.
So there is, and this is not a theoretical
This isn't
issue, this is a practical issue.
Right.
I very much appreciate having that that very much sways my.
So let me
opinion.
ask you this question then, is there life still in this? That could be replaced to the place,
Potentially.
the place where there are larger kids who it's, now you're telling me it's designed for?
Yeah, potentially.
Okay,
But
looks like it's in good.
we've been,
condition.
We keep it in good shape.
we've been
Yeah.
intentionally
Yeah.
careful about how we're talking about this, given the sensitivity of the topic, but there is a concern about this equipment.
Okay,
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks for connecting, Bob.
Thank you.
So the next project, feasibility study for entry and driveway expansion. Potentially, added parking as well. If you're familiar with the driveway, you know that it winds. There is not enough parking at that building. So anytime there's an event there where families would attend, typically cars park on both sides of the driveway. And I can tell you, based on experience from 6 years ago, I asked Chief Marino to come in to the building during one of the events, and he said that he had a very difficult time. It was a very slow go, trying to get up through the driveway to the building. And at that point, he raised the concern that if there were a fire or medical emergency, would not be able to get up into that driveway. So at that time, we added it in the out years. I will say that from time to time, Mass DOT comes out with some grants. At that point, I usually consult with the DPW and our facility director to see if there's any possibility that this type of a project might be a good fit. But with any release of funding, there's also parameters, and the scope of the project doesn't necessarily fit the parameters, and therefore it's not a viable option. That doesn't mean at some point there might not be, but for now, anytime we've seen grants that come up, this is not a project that fits the criteria. For those, we see this as really a public safety matter. And I'm sure that you will hear the same if you talk to either of the chiefs.
So one of the topics that came up in our discussions as a school committee was, number one, this lot is very limiting in terms of what we can and can't potentially do for traffic. That being said, if we're looking at playground equipment, we have to recognize the fact that the playground equipment is outside of the footprint of the building. And we probably ought not to cite playground equipment before we know the ideal solution for where we're gonna run driveways and parking. So there was quite a bit of discussion about which year we put these in, and it was determined that we really can't do, while the playground equipment is very important, we really shouldn't be doing it without clearly understanding where we're gonna put driveways and parking spaces with, you know, and then potentially risk having to move the playground equipment.
I'm assuming that that large green area is.
So the large green area,
play
you can,
fields?
you can faintly see
Yes, I
that
can
there are three soccer fields
Okay. So they're fields.
mapped out there. Lysa with the younger students play on that space.
Mhm.
Where you see the tan area off to the left side, middle screen there, that's the existing playground.
This is an important field for
Yeah.
rectangular fields in town.
Very.
Yep.
I mean, we're all about baseball fields in this town. We don't have any rectangular fields.
You're right.
We have a surplus of baseball fields, but
Yeah, it's dreaded case of shapeism, yes.
well, and declining baseball participation, but we don't have rectangular fields, so this is really important space for that.
It is, but you can see the entirety really of the parking at the very top of that screen.
I
And
remember it was.
and
It was
basically,
brought up in right at the very beginning of this, the parking was to that.
basically, that's the amount of parking that's required for the staff in the building.
Mhm.
So if you have an event, like an open house where all of the teachers have to be, or parent-teacher conferences where all the teachers have to be, they're occupying all of those spaces. So parents park the entire length of that driveway.
Right next to the no parking signs.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can see,
Right from,
Exactly.
you can see that right now in this photo,
Yes.
yeah,
with cars parked all along the driveway.
probably see the other person walking their dog in front of the no dogs allowed sign.
Also pretty bad
All right.
intersection.
It's a really
Yes.
bad location, honestly,
Mhm.
to come out right there at that bend. And keeping in mind, there are buses that are 2.5 of my vehicle trying to pull out into that roadway there and not get clipped by an oncoming car on the bend, so. There are those challenges as well. All right, so the AC units, I think we've talked about this quite a lot. And I mentioned this at a special town meeting the other evening. That phase two, the remaining classrooms with mini splits would be a project that we included in the capital plan.
Pretty good place.
Gas condensing boilers, again, this is for plans only. To replace the existing gas boilers.
What was the year that building opened?
2005.
2005? Yeah, 5 or 6, okay, gotcha. Okay. This is,
And then in FY 27,
this will be the actual plan,
right,
okay.
purchase of the play equipment, installation of the play equipment.
And
And then
actual-
the actual
okay.
parking expansion, again, it was purposeful to put them, together. So that we could have some assessment of the two projects and coordinate, so that, we approach them in a way that one doesn't interfere with the other.
I remember you.
Okay, so then we look at some district-wide projects. Last year, this came forward as one whole price tag for all three schools. We've broken that out. And as you can see highlighted, Turkey Hill Elementary School, film there is a little more than 33,000. And that is the school committee priority ranking one of all the projects. If you look at the primary school and the middle high school, those were rankings 7 and 8 respectively.
And just to quickly recap, not rehash, recap. If it's a safety issue, then why the large discrepancy between the rankings between the buildings?
I think that, largely the concern is the location in the building for where you have all of that, large floor to ceiling glass. And the fact that Turkey Hill Elementary, it's single pane glass, single pane.
Thank you. Okay, then we want to review this, and we've been through this last year, so you're pretty aware. There's that picture again.
So those first two are Turkey Hill. This is the primary school. And then there you have the front entrance of the middle high school. Again, you can see that there are sections of ground to ceiling glass.
Did the town vote to like fortify the entrances last year?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that work done?
It is not done yet, no. We have door replacement for the entire Turkey Hill,
Yeah.
for all the exterior doors. The doors are aging and they're not as reliable with latching. So we will be building out that vestibule, adding another set of doors. And using all of those exterior.
Just so you're aware, George, that we're only 4.2 months into the fiscal year. So that money that was voted in May doesn't become available to July 1st. So
We also,
Didn't have a facility director.
our facilities director has been on for 3 weeks. Is it week 3 now?
Going on, yeah.
Yeah, oh, going on, okay. So,
we generally don't expect anything till we
so, right. So we're a little back though.
Now, we did approve last year the full exterior door replacements on
Yes,
Turkey Hill?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
oh, thank goodness, that's,
Yes.
happy to hear that.
So I'm sorry about the formatting on this slide. It isn't formatting that way on mine.
Well, I'm doing it right off the Google Drive. So maybe
Yes.
it's doing something funky that way.
No, sometimes in translation
Yes.
to Google, it
Yeah.
doesn't work well. So we would be looking to replace a dump truck with a plow.
Was this on last year?
Didn't get funded.
It
I know,
was
but
not.
that's what I'm saying,
Yes.
it was on.
Yes,
And weren't you looking for a salter last year?
so we were. However, we actually purchased a small salting unit to utilize last year during the winter months. So no need for the additional salting unit. Now we have one.
I particularly commend you for the wonderful broken down by the side of the road with the hood up.
Isn't that awesome?
Yes, with a jug of water, that's
With the
very impressive.
Lunenburg logo on.
Yes,
So,
Yeah, that was a handy.
We're gonna deflate a tire, just
Lots of one side.
So,
next year, you got
All about sale, all about pitch.
Yeah,
This-
hopefully it goes to, hopefully it goes to
this actually was a hand-me-down
Yeah,
from
Yes, it was.
the DPW.
Okay, lots of rust, yes.
Yeah, so again,
More
these aren't
rust.
new pictures, they're the ones that, you know, we
Yeah,
share
what
with
is
you.
So. For Chris, I mean, the thing that we have here is, we obviously share a lot of work with the DPW. They've been awesome partners. As well as our custodial staff and maintenance staff that totally get on any kind of snowfall event. We really need to be able to plow our parking lots in a timely manner, particularly in the evenings and sand them. And now we need to do that as all the other stuff that we do.
And if memory serves, last year when we were discussing this, we talked a lot about the safety aspect in terms of even just if an event gets out late and there's been snow, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep, yeah, and so, you know, when you look at, and we didn't have the benefit of kind of a holistic look at the age of the fleet last year, but the town manager provided a really good kind of holistic view of the entire inventory. The school department's trucks in particular are old. You know, so we're replacing very old vehicles, hopefully with vehicles that will last us a couple more decades. They don't get a ton of use, but they're old.
Who does the plowing for the school?
Our maintenance and grounds crew.
So they're on call during games to do this?
So, for
You know, I'm not a big proponent.
For any event in the evening, it's staffed by somebody on the custodial or maintenance staff is there. And if there is a snow event, the maintenance staff is called in to get on whatever the issue is. And so they have to do, for example, sanding of sidewalks, but they don't do we just went through this whole contract thing. They don't do the sanding of the parking lot.
Hey, new van,
New van,
FY 29.
so this has been on the capital plan for the duration of my tenure. It was a new ad when I came in because our athletic director at the time raised the thought that, well, why don't we have a van? Because we have some teams that are particularly small. Let's say our golf team. So they would have to transport themselves to different competitions because it's not cost effective for us to hire a school bus to transport a small number of kiddos. We've also had some smaller other student related trips. As an example, our student council participate in a conference that's held down on the Cape each year. And again, if that the advisor was authorized to drive, you could transport all of the
Not a special
kids.
license, right? 'Cause
No,
Just a regular.
Oh, you need a 7D, don't you?
No,
no, I don't think for a passenger van. That's, I learned how to
just a regular.
drive a car.
Okay.
Just a D.
Not a
Class
passenger
D
van.
I've never seen this on any capital plan.
I work for a bus
So you're
It's
saying
been
Been tucked away, pushed
it's
back,
been pushed out.
well, we got it to 29. so-
Right.
I asked, 'cause I work for a bus, got a 7D license. I do sports events and everything.
Well, we'll double check on that, but
And like, I'm not allowed to drive over 8 students in this time, so if it's anything more than that, you need a CDL license.
Really?
okay.
Or-
Oh,
And then there's the liability aspect.
I would imagine.
well, yeah, but there's a liability aspect of things right now because you have adult staff getting consent, parent consent to drive kiddos to these types of events, or they're driving with their peers. in a car for that distance, so, there would be, opportunity for use, of this vehicle for a variety compared to the other items that are on the capital plan.
Yeah, we have a few years to.
Yeah, this-
We'll look at licensing. I honestly, that's the person.
Yeah, okay, I'm just,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I'm not against it,
Yeah.
I'm pointing out that.
Yeah.
that-
it's a good point.
that goes
And we
with
can
it.
either, contract with somebody to be called in, when we have an event scheduled, to be able to drive the van, or some of our staff may not be opposed to, maybe even one of our, maintenance team getting the CDL.
Okay, let's project all the way out to FY 33.
Oh, and we have the replacement mowers coming up too.
3 of them, or
No. I just don't know exactly what it's going to look like, and that showed a variety, so
it will be a John Deere though, right?
I can't promise that it will be a John Deere.
Then I won't vote for it.
Mr. Heavy, it'll be a John Deere.
Well, we got some orange people too, and but
What is the mower that we got this year? Is that a deer or is that a?
No.
Just got, I didn't think it was.
No, it's not.
Couple of mowers, too. There's a lot of brands of mowers.
no, there's only
Arians.
Yeah.
Might be.
That's blue.
Okay.
All right,
Nice.
so if you take a look, the priority rankings, 1, 2, and 3. This is based on school committee discussion and actual vote. It's the window film for Turkey Hill Elementary,
Mhm.
parsed out from the project that was all the film, for all 3 buildings.
Mhm.
The planning study for the renovations, of Turkey Hill. And that dump truck. And again,
But now, Pete, the window film, that was a 4? When are they? 4 and 5? I think there was 7.
it was
Yeah.
7,
Well, there was 7
Oh.
and 8. but
Yeah,
they're
they're out
4
of
and 5.
ones.
let me get you an updated one of
Thank you.
these.
I think
This is just an education department test to make sure you were listening, right? I'm gonna.
Oh, you were.
1, 2, and 3.
I think this is the accurate version, but we need to go back.
I'll double check.
Okay. Okay,
And then lastly, you have the layout of the 10-year at a glance again, and you can see all of the large price tag items for Turkey Hill are in the out years in
Yeah.
31. We placed them in 31 because it was maybe two years ago, year and a half ago. There was some discussion, I believe, around plans for renovation of TCP, and the question was asked, when would the town be in a position to take on a Turkey Hill Elementary project? And Karen Brochu at that time said FY 31. So that's why you see all of those numbers sort of land there. You know, it's in those out years, and you'll see that many of those projects are notated with that asterisk.
so
And
the actual
that,
costs are double,
Correct.
yeah,
so that instead of 12 million for the most part, except for the
Yeah.
tile, we're looking at, so $24 million. I already know, how to-
And,
new building,
and
there's no point.
ADA is not on there. Because we don't know.
we don't know what that
Well,
is.
that's,
AD modification.
that's at least
There's no way
$30,000
that's.
at least.
Yeah, but the reason why this is really important to know and really have a better understanding of this, whether we do it or don't do it, or build a new building, or don't build a new building. Is when you look at, okay, what is phase 3 gonna be? We're gonna have a community center and a community kitchen and gym space and all this stuff. Is that better put at TCP or is it better put at Turkey Hill? You know, where are we gonna invest the big dollars
I hear you.
in these buildings? And we really need to know what the investment needs, would be. to be able to make an educated decision. So,
Mhm.
you know, I don't,
What this, Brett, what this chart shows me is that in 2020, FY 27, we better have a decision made by
really-
28.
we really do, we really do a good plan.
I'm super grateful for these long-term numbers for Turkey Hill and everything else to wrap my mind around everything. Thank you very much.
So thank you, yes, thank you to both of you for this and the support staff behind you. I don't know if it was mentioned that the school committee chair is with us tonight too as well.
That's okay. Just watch.
Thank you, Karen. No, that's good. So, yeah, I mean, I've seen, we're gonna focus on through the end of December, we're gonna focus on FY 20. And then we're in the new year, when our charge for this year, that what the coming year's FY plan is done, we will review the whole chart with everything. It does give us something to, you know, plan in advance this time for, so. Anybody have any further questions? Obviously, there were questions along the way, but I asked if there were further questions on the school department.
So is there anything that hasn't been included in this, in your opinion? I mean, I know there's unknowns. and
Yeah, there's a lot.
ups and- But is there anything that we're like, oh, we haven't yet about?
So. I mean, a lot of discussion went into this I mean. And this is my second year on school committee, but I was on the finance committee for 3 years before that. And I can tell you that the school committee, and I was the finance committee liaison to the school committee. The school committee put more time into this than any of the last 5 years, far and away.
As a member of this committee for the last, this is my third year, I would agree.
Yeah,
That's
now,
very clear.
that being said, is there stuff that isn't on this? Probably.
Well,
I mean, you know,
there's a whole blank year in FY 30,
Yeah,
so
I
yeah.
mean, you know,
I mean-
the truth of the matter is I don't know the answer to that question, but I think this is this is as far as the school committee could take it this year.
Well, the one I was thinking is, how about fields? How are you on fields as we?
Square or
It's where.
square or diamond?
Yeah, all of it.
So the school department, to my earlier comment, we are investing from the regular budget in the grass fields at the middle high school, and they're not as much that they ought to be. And the reason it has to do with just use, we're beating the hell out of those fields, and we're all aware of it. And we're managing it as best we can. My biggest concern right now is that if we run into a situation where we can't use the turf fields and we're overutilizing those other 3 fields, we may be in a problem. We can't move around. But there isn't a clear path to add field space right now.
I just even feel like in the past, it seemed like it was easier to go to the track and just walk the track. I feel like it's hard for the public to just go.
Just because of the programming.
Yeah, and it's always something going on, so. The whole community's aspect of fields versus just schools and organized children's sports and.
I think it's a fair point.
Courts.
We're programming the heck out of those
Yeah.
fields. And it's with the fact that we are shutting down the grass fields in the summer months, so. You know, practices, for example, that start in August are almost all on the turf field. Band camp, all that stuff is happening on the turf field because of the maintenance of the grass fields.
Well,
No.
maintenance of grass field handled, I mean, I remember playing soccer in high school. Back then, it was the same thing.
Yeah, it's always.
By this time of the year,
It's a mess.
with you tearing up the grass and it's bad weather and it's, I mean, it was just a mud
But the-
field.
the
And Mother
difference-
Nature did
the-
not help us at all
No.
this summer
No.
because we had torrential rain and it kept washing seed
The,
and we
the big difference
just couldn't
though,
keep up.
Tom, is that in Lunenburg, at least, we did have more square footage for practice fields and those kinds of things back before we built the middle high school. And we were not running us, and you know, we're now running more programs than we were
Right.
30 years ago.
Right,
So
eventually, I mean, I think a lot of that was predicated when turf field came. I mean, I remember the programming went way up when that happened, so. The victim of your own success at some point.
I am very grateful for this conversation because, I. Last year and even the start of this year, I've looked at the costs for the turf field. And really. With no disrespect meant to youth sports, has been a real wonder of, is that much money really worth for such a small slice of the student body? And now what I'm hearing is it isn't a small slice of the student body. And that is something that I did not understand last year.
Yeah.
And having that context, I'll be honest, radically.
It's not only the student body, it's
Yeah.
also, we're running adult soccer, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in that facility. The other thing I would add though, and I agree with you, that if you want to do anything like, my kid throws a shot put and we're often in the space behind it in the throwing circles, watching what's going up there on the weekends and stuff. And you're absolutely right. There are frequently families and adults on, particularly on the weekends, and it is usable in that regard unless there's a track event happening. Even if there's a thing on the field, you can still use the track, with the possible exception of a football game. Lost my train of thought, but I'll get it back here in a sec. The courts, the tennis courts are heavily used by the community in an unorganized fashion, that's the point court. So I'm there
And in a slightly.
all the time. I mean, I'm there a ton, and there's a ton of community use happening on those courts.
And I would say too, relative to the student body use, we get reports for each season based on the number of kids that are playing each sport. And consistently, the number of kiddos playing has been 40% of the students at the high school any given season. So nearly half the student body is using the facility every season.
And that's why I appreciate this, because in my mind, I look at it and go, okay, football track. Like, sure, I love those things,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money for.
Field
football
hockey,
track.
soccer, lacrosse,
No.
Bengals, LISA,
Then we put
adults.
it in the
programs,
context
yeah.
of having the turf field as part of a mixed approach to also take, basically to cut expenses on the grass field as well. And I appreciate this conversation. It gives me so much more scope.
Don't forget pickleball.
Like, moving on. I'd love to trip down sports memorabilia. So, we have a couple more items on the agenda, and it is.
So I will get you some corrected,
Yes,
updated
thank you.
slides. Thank you.
Send them to me and the town manager, and she will post them.
Okay.
And I want to thank you both
Thank you.
again, and thank you. Or it was nice meeting you.
Yes.
Carol, it's always a pleasure to see
Yeah.
you. Okay, we have approval of minutes. Mr. Beerbar, are you getting on?
I am.
All right, so have you been able to review the minutes of
I have.
October 23rd?
I have.
But I'm sure nothing really happened anyway, because it was in the beginning of our process. Okay, has everybody reviewed the minutes of October 23rd? And if so, I will entertain a motion regarding those.
Motion to approve.
For a second,
Okay.
any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed.
I was abstaining.
You abstain, okay,
So I
so
was
401.
prefer not to vote.
That's
I
what
wasn't here.
Absolutely fine. So 401 is approved. Action, so next meeting, and I don't have it with me because again, it's on my phone, that doesn't have my email, which I address when I get home this evening, but I believe next week we have a meeting.
Yes, the 27th.
The 27th, which is a Monday. Okay,
So,
I'll get that to.
That
the clerk
is
tomorrow.
a planning board meeting, so that's.
there is?
On
We had agreed all of those meetings. but-
I think the 27th was,
I think that was a fifth Monday, which is why but it might not be, it might be a fourth Monday.
you know, we absolutely, to say, because I went over the agenda today as well. I mean, that may have been discussed.
But let me look at it and I'll send it out. I'm sorry again.
So,
If I have to miss it, I can watch after, I'd rather
I
not.
need you both to tell me what your schedules are for your committees,
yeah,
so I don't have to look at it. If you could email me when Mondays and what Wednesdays you're going, and if you guys have any Mondays and Wednesdays you can't make it from now to the end of the year.
I'll update you, just
So
because,
December 11th is I'm away.
yeah, I'm away that week as well.
December 11th?
Yeah.
Okay, so then
Um,
we're not having a week.
so the 27th, I was planning to attend this meeting at 6 p.m. The meeting that caused me to request this meeting to be delayed, the 6 o'clock meeting tonight, got canceled. And rescheduled for next Monday at 6 p.m. And by the way, it was entirely my fault, so.
Okay, well, again, I'm not
So
looking,
in any event,
if you can't make it and he can't make it, we're not gonna meet with 3, we'll meet with 4.
I could still do a 7 o'clock next Monday.
Well, but he's.
He can't make it.
Yeah, no, I think we're gonna be,
So let me make sure that was the day we decided,
Yeah.
and if so, we'll have to cancel that, and we probably need, well, wow, hold on, that means I gotta reschedule.
We could meet.
Facilities.
So
Well, facilities is scheduled for the next
for
meeting.
that
so I
day,
gotta-
but Tom, let me offer this. 27, 28, 29, there is no school committee meeting that week. So potentially we could meet the 29.
Mhm. Can you meet the 29th?
absolutely.
Okay, can you guys meet the 29th?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so 11/29, and then come to that meeting or before, please tell me the other meeting so we can hash it out, because after we hear that, we're probably gonna need, I'm gonna guess 3 meetings at least to finalize, if not 4. I'd rather not go 4, because then we have to start double 2 meetings in a week, which we can do. But we have to get it done. I'd rather not meet between Christmas and New Year, but I will if we have one final meeting, but I'd love to see if we can get it done. Because as soon as we can get, as soon as the facilities present to us, we can get the town manager to give us a list, put out the spreadsheet so that everybody can rank on their own, we can discuss them. You know, one meeting of just open discussion, then we go back and rank them. Then the next meeting, when we come back, talk about them more, and then have one more meeting to finalize it. That's what I'd like to be able to do.
So when do we think facilities is?
Probably 29.
It'll be the next meeting, they're the only ones left.
Okay.
But I have to, if we're not meeting on the 20th,
Yeah, I think.
Well, I mean, the 27th.
I'm in the same ballpark you are, I don't have a working phone.
I think it does ring in my bell that the 29th was it.
Oh, okay.
I will check because, but anyway, I'll find out. But I'll confirm the agenda. Okay, is there any public comment from the public? Seeing no public. Any public comment from the committee members?
I just want to say was really pleased with, and I appreciate your written statement and your verbal statement at the special town meeting last week pertaining to, what I believe was Article 4. I'm glad that we stuck with the capital planning process and going down that path. I think we made the town meeting made the right decision on that. And I didn't expect it to go that way, so I was pleasantly surprised. But it was the town meeting.
What I said, I ultimately meant, I mean, I'm the one who wanted it to be on the warrant article. But as I said, after hearing other objections to it, Mr. Menard's not being one of the, not being the only one, but being the one I heard first. It did occur to me what I said, that if I wasn't the select board, I mean, I wanted it for flexibility because there are things we need to do.
Now,
But again, if I wasn't a select board member and I was in the town meeting audience chair, I would have voted against it for that very reason, and so it makes no sense that I would voted for it. I think it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I think
your words.
the town meeting made the right decision, even though it is going to make some spending not as expeditious as it might have otherwise been.
We also have the reserve fund that could be used for that we typically don't use.
What reserve? The
We
reserve
have,
fund?
yeah, the reserve.
Oh, so
fund.
that the finance committee control.
Yeah, so it needs to happen as a presentation, I think, to us.
Yeah, typically that gets rolled, if it's not used, it just gets rolled into free cash, but it could be used.
Well, they
Or
did,
snow and-
Oh, snow and ice.
yeah, they
right.
did heavily.
It's applied at the Springtown meeting and then it gets transferred, is that what happens?
Yeah,
There's also the discussion that some, because of the way taxes are gonna be done.
Might be.
This year, there's going to be abatements and it'll be after being able to really do anything. That's why we put it in reserve fund, but we didn't want to put it in the overlay because then it takes a large vote to get it. It takes a vote of the board of assessors to bring it up. So that was part of the reason why the reserve fund was added, but there'll be enough things like snow and ice to offset it.
are we making progress on finance director and assistant finance director? Well,
I know we're putting it out there and trying to uncover every rock. I mean, it's not something you make progress on. It's either something you get or you don't. It's kind of like a light switch, so. You know, we may have a principal assessor finally, and although that's not finalized, so. The answer is they're actively working, trying to get people. It's just not easy to get.
School department. should have contract with the Finance director and head of HR to replace Mr. Cassidy. So, yes, his last day is Wednesday, so.
so the three critical finance positions in town going into budget season are unfilled.
Yes, and ours will not be filled.
How could that end poorly?
And
I don't know.
And in full disclosure, the woman who we hired is under contract until the first week of February. So we don't know exactly what her start date.
So it's a shared, not even a shared, it's okay. Okay, any other public comment from the committee? I want to thank you all for the good discussion tonight,
Yeah,
as
great.
always, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Good night, everyone, and we will see you at the next meeting.